Ladies and gentlemen, I was originally going to do... I'm just going to be totally honest with you guys. I was going to do a slightly different format for this, but two big important things got in the way. First of all, if you've seen my Voyager finale, you know that I gave, like, my top, bottom, and then I gave your guys' top, bottom. And there was enough of a distinction between the two that kind of worked. It doesn't really work that way this time. We kind of are in agreement, so I don't really want to be redundant, so I'm not going to be. Instead, we're just going to talk about yours and mine pretty much in the same go. Second problem, though, and this is a significantly bigger one, I don't really know why, but I can't capture footage properly from my DVDs of B5. Like, I can sometimes, but not reliably, and not every episode. I'll give you an example. I have a clip, I'm not going to show you it, but I have a clip where I was splicing together some footage of Londo to talk about Mr. Malari. And it's like, alright, footage, it's a little grainy, but, it's a DVD, what do you want? So, Londo, red screen! And then Londo again. And I have been unable to determine exactly why this is. I've tried reformatting them. I have tried converting them into different video files. I have tried many different things, and I simply cannot get... There's just some episodes I cannot get footage of. So what I like to do is to have footage in the background here that's relevant to what I'm talking about. What's going to happen is something kind of more of a in-between of that, because I can't get all the footage I wanted. Sorry about this, guys. So if you start to see a little bit of repetition in the background, that's why. Now, I gotta say, when I was sitting down and thinking about this, I was really looking forward to hearing your guys' thoughts. Let me just say it's been an absolute treat going through this series. It has been fantastic being able to sit down, really analysis mode things. It's funny how much my opinion has changed on so many aspects of this show as I've gone through it. Some things are even better than I remembered, and some things... well, to be honest, are a lot worse than I remembered. And I find that interesting because if I had asked these questions that I asked you guys and tallied the votes in a few years ago, before I actually started this, my answers would have been different than right now. But that's enough of me just rambling. Why don't we get to the first category, which is the worst of Babylon 5. Now, the way I was defining this in my head was anything that's worthy of lamentation status, which is pretty rough. Getting to the level of lamentation, anybody who knows me knows that it takes quite a bit to get that far down. In fact, if you were paying attention, I didn't think a single episode was worthy of lamentation going through this. Wasn't sure that was going to be going through it, but I've gotten some votes in from you guys. I've tallied them up in order here. I'm going to be referring to my notes because, to be completely honest, I don't remember all of these episodes by heart just from the name of it. So forgive me if I kind of glance at my notes here every now and again. We had quite a few variety of different votes from you guys. So all of the following all got one vote each. So I'm just going to hammer down the list. The first we have is Moments of Transition, an episode which is kind of a sudden end to the Minbari Civil War. Just sort of, and then it's over. Out of nowhere. Lita struggles with unemployment. And Clark finally decides to start attacking civilians. Man, I thought he'd never get around to it. Coming in as well, after that, we have A View from the Gallery, which is kind of a Lower Decks episode, but not quite. But the Lower Decks part is kind of eyebrow-raising in its own right, because it just didn't quite feel like a Lower Decks episode. But what's really interesting about that episode is there's these sector-wide, galaxy-threatening aliens we've never heard before, or since, who just show up and are like, oh, okay, we lost, we're good. Moving on. Next one on the list is Into the Fire. I gotta be honest, I don't get this one. Into the Fire is an episode in which Londo decides to finally just absolutely curb stomp Mr. Morden and the Shadows, free Centauri Prime of Shadow influence, offers up his own life as a method of trying, not just as penance, but far more importantly, to save his people. Lorien convinces the Old Ones to finally leave. The Shadows and the Vorlons finally leave the galaxy along with the rest of the Old Ones. The Third Age of Mankind begins. I don't know why this one was voted here. Normally I like to snark at these things, but I have nothing to snark at. I love this episode. So, next on the list, Objects at Rest. Now, I know why this one's on the list. There's not a lot actually happening in Objects at Rest. But, so first we've got the tragic final effort that Londo has, on camera at least, to free himself of that damned Keeper. which fails because Sheridan has decided to stop carrying alcohol. Way to go, Sheridan. I know, he didn't know, but still. We also see Garibaldi decide to kind of overturn Edgar's Industries into something more Garibaldi-ish. And then Lanier, this is the one, then Lanier decides to come out of nowhere and betray Sheridan out of basically nowhere. And I can't say they didn't build up to this, but it really was just kind of a, oh, I'm going to let you die. Wait, no, I can't let you die. Oh, you got out. And that's pretty much the end of Lanier's character arc, is that he tries to get Sheridan killed out of what I can only imagine is a romantic jealousy, and then flees. Next episode is Sleeping in Light, which you might recognize as the last episode of the series. Sleeping in Light, of course, is the episode in which Sheridan finally does die and passes on into whatever actually happens. Ivanova joins the Rangers out of a desire to actually remain significant with regards to doing something rather than piloting a desk. Veer manages to be Emperor. Oh, and of course, I can't forget this. Babylon 5 ends in fire. Wah, wah. That's the only part of that episode I don't like, is just, oh, come on, really? You had to do that? Next one on the list is Grail. Now, I actually forgot this one. I'm glad I looked this one up. I thought this was the other one with the King Arthur jump. But no, this is the one where David Warner shows up and is awesome. And then William Sanderson shows up and is awesome. And then there's these things called the Feeders, which mind wipe people. I don't even know what to say about that, so let's just move on. Intersections in real time. Now, I remember this submission because I remember that the person said that this was on their list for worst episode because they cannot rewatch it. And I don't blame them for that. This is a brutal, horrifying look at the realities of military interrogation when you are unrestrained in what it is you're allowed to do. Almost everything that happens in that is straight out of military textbooks regarding unrestrained interrogation. And it is unpleasant and horrible on multiple levels. You know, this is not Hollywood interrogation. You know, this is not Mel Gibson having his guts pulled out by a guy with a crooked, a rusted knife. No, this is much worse than that. And I have to admit, it was pretty rough watching that episode, so I can see where they were coming from on that one. Next one up is Convictions. Not sure why this one is on the list, but then again, the only thing I remember of significance from this episode is Londo and Jakar in an elevator being awesome. Also known as every time Londo and Jakar are on camera together. I hear you. This is also the episode in which Brother Theo makes his first appearance. First of many, as it would turn out. Next one on the list is Walkabout. This is the first time we see Ulkesh, who's never actually named in the series. I'm not sure at which point I learned his name. I'm really not. It was probably when I was going through one of the old message boards, and because JMS actually flat out says his name is Ulkesh. He does the whole Kosh thing to be typically Vorlon. But oh, excuse me, Walkabout is also the episode in which they discover the shadow vulnerability to telepathy, which is pretty significant, actually, and will end up being quite a bit of a game changer for the series. Oh, right, also, Dr. Franklin is taking a walkabout to try and discover himself and has a fling with a dying singer. Couldn't forget that part. Soul Hunter! Gotta be honest, I'm a little surprised more people didn't vote for that one. Soul Hunter's not... I mean, it wasn't my pick, but Soul Hunter's dumb. Okay, there's these guys, and they run around, and they can sense death somehow, and they wait for the dead, and they take the dead's souls, or what may or may not be their souls, or maybe it's just their memories. I mean, we don't actually figure that out. And of course, he's got to go show up and take Delen's soul before she dies for science. It's very important. Also, they're using you! They're using you! It's a tragic waste of Morgan Shepard. I had to look up his name there because I didn't remember it off the top of my head. Excuse me. Then we get into the episodes that had 2 votes each. So everyone I just mentioned had only 1 vote each for worst moment of Babylon 5. The following 3 have 2 votes. The first of those would be Gray 17 is missing. I gotta be honest, I am a little bit astonished that this one wasn't further up on the list, although I wouldn't have voted for it as well. Upon rewatching Gray 17, I forgot that it's an episode that involves deep, significant political machinations between the Minbari and the maneuvers of the Rangers, and Marcus being awesome and showcasing his devotion to the cause of the Rangers. We live for the one, we die for the one. You know, the future of the Minbar people, and Neroon developing as a character, going from less of a I'm just a bastard and more of a more fleshed out character. Oh, by the way, there's also a Zarg that's apparently one of the most deadliest creatures in the sector, and people who are obsessed with the hand. Yeah. The Gathering. This one's not a surprise either. In fact, if you'll notice, a lot of these are early episodes. The Gatherings... What can I say about it? It's funny in its own right, because The Gathering was sort of mistimed when it comes to the rest of the series, and doesn't really capture any of the essence of the characters, with probably the sole exception of Mr. Malari. Excuse me. Londo is actually Londo in The Gathering. Everyone else, a lot more debatable than that. And as I'm going through The Gathering, all I can help thinking is, God, huh? Is that Delenn? I mean, never mind her appearance, just the way they act is just off. And you could tell none of the actors had really gotten a handle on their roles yet. And so it comes across as kind of like a stage play. You know what I mean? People are just not really sure what they're doing yet, haven't really gotten a handle on it yet, and it's just kind of amateurish. And the third, number 2 voted, was A Distant Star, where we find out that Lieutenant Keffer exists because the studio literally forced him to exist, so JMS would later kill him, of course. And we see our first real glimpse into the shadow ships. Oh, and also, there's the Captain Smiles a Lot. I can't even remember his frickin' name. I point this out just as a quick anecdote here. When I asked Pax, a great friend of mine, who's also watched Babylon 5, his least favorite episode of B5, this was his least favorite, and it was because of Captain Grins a Lot. He was just kind of, hey, I'm on TV, yeah, and he wasn't really putting in a good performance, and it was pretty blah. Next one up, next episode, is actually one that got 3 votes as for it being the worst moment. I got no jokes or no snarking for this one. It's the episode Believers, and it's bad. It's well, I shouldn't say it's bad. It's actually, I shouldn't actually say it that way, but it is. What I mean is, it's very obvious why people would consider this a low point of the series. There's nothing I could joke about Believers. It's, for those of you who don't remember, it's the episode in which a certain alien race's particular belief system leads them to deliberately kill their own child in order to save him from what they believe to be a fate worse than death, while Franklin is desperately trying to save said child's life. What can I add to that? Now, I did get some footage for the next couple episodes. Yay. So why don't we segue over to our third worst moment in Babylon 5 history? Yep, it's Infection. You remember this one? This is actually the first episode they recorded for this series, and by God does it show. Like I can't even speak anything really positive. It's hard to even snark about an episode like this. It's like, okay, we've got this ancient bioweapon thing, which is made by a people who are basically Nazis and trying to enable this whole purist thing, and that leads to the guy trying to kill him, but it's okay because the thing then takes over him and makes him like, oh God, I must become one with the alien bio thing. And this, of course, leads to what will eventually become the emphasis on biotechnology throughout the series. And, in fact, one of the points of significance in this episode is the fact that this is when EarthGov really starts to examine this type of tech and starts working on this, which will eventually become part of the whole shadow conspiracy thing. Oh, and, of course, he turns into this thing. He just roars. He's just this stupid idiot. I'm sorry. I mean no offense to the actors, but the whole confrontation between Sinclair, who's like, oh, this is terrible, versus the monster. And then when the monster takes off the thing, he's back to normal just like that. The only moment of actual significance in this whole episode... Oh, right, there's also a reporter lady who's got a subplot that's so irrelevant, I don't even remember her name or the name or the significance of that, but there's a whole subplot with EarthGov being like, we're going to take this biotechnology and it's going to be a thing, and unlike in the later parts of the episode, Babylon 5's crew is just like, yeah, okay, do whatever. Yeah, not the best outing. Coming in at number 2... This was my vote, by the way. Nothing. As I said when I was doing the Voot episode, nothing was a valid answer. This is my vote as well. Lord knows that Babylon 5 has down points. I mean, I'm not going to lie about that. But even the worst episodes of Babylon 5 were still at least entertaining to me, or in a once-through kind of a way. Or, okay, I could go with that. But as I said before, nothing in Babylon 5 truly hit lamentation point for me. So, apparently some of y'all agreed with me on this because, like I said, this was the second most voted option. Although I was kind of hoping it would be the most voted. But alas, the next one actually beat it. And here, let me check my notes here. By one vote. So, ladies and gentlemen, the worst moment in Babylon 5 by popular vote is... Gotta be honest, this one kind of surprised me. This just kept getting votes and votes and votes because there's some great significant moments of character development and helping to flesh out Ivanova as a character and helping us to learn more about her and her estranged relationship with her father, whom she loves but she was never close to, and the complex levels of emotions that happen between two people who have a connection but not a strong connection. Oh, and by the way, there's this guy who really wants to make a comeback by fighting some aliens. That's really important to the plot, and he doesn't really know how to. But then we go back to the character stuff of opening up about what happened with him and trying to connect with him. And even though she doesn't fully believe in the stuff here that's going on with the Shiva, sitting Shiva and all that, maybe this would be a good way to try and but then we gotta punch people. Yeah, we're gonna violence. Yeah. I really think this episode speaks for itself. So next up, why don't we talk about our favorite characters in this show? It's not hard to understand favorite characters in this show. There are so many great characters, and they have so many great moments. It's no surprise to me that as I look at the list, it's this gargantuan spread. Like, I'm amazed at how much of a spread we've got here. So I'm just going to bullet point these, because y'all know who these people are. Coming in at last, with one vote each, we have Zothras. Although I'm not sure which Zothras. Maybe it's Zothras or Zothras or Zathras. I'm not actually sure. But either way, Zothras, who, yeah, it's easy to understand why he would be likable. We also have Lita. I'm a little surprised we only got one vote for Lita. Certainly she became more and more of a character by the end of Season 4 and throughout Season 5, although some of that was kind of attached to Byron, so I could kind of see why that would be there. Now this one I'm definitely surprised didn't get more votes, because we have Mr. Morden. Mr. Agent of the Shadows. Mr. Morden, I just want to talk briefly about him, because Mr. Morden was interesting to me because he represented the face of the Shadows. Something that was almost necessary for us to have any comprehension of them as a culture or a people, unless they wanted to portray them as just a completely alien force. And obviously JMS wanted them to be at least understandable and relatable as a culture. Thus, we need something we, the audience, can relate to. Thus, they use a mouthpiece, and thus we have Mr. Morden. Coming up next, also voted with one vote, Franklin, Dr. Franklin. I'm a little surprised about this one as well. I know several people who rather enjoy Franklin as a character, although he does get a little preachy at times, but it's fully understandable why. And, I mean, his whole walkabout arc really did kind of drag on just a little bit, but I could see why people still would like him. And, of course, funnily enough, tied with Lita with one vote is Talia, the other telepath who was originally supposed to be the same telepath who the two were... Whatever. The point being, the other telepath who was probably dissected and probably analyzed and used in future telepath research. So that's always good. I wonder if the vote was for Talia or for Control, because those are two different people. Coming in next with two votes each, we've got Lanier. I actually rather could see this one. Lanier, well, it certainly is definitely a flawed character. It has a sort of unique charm to him. And it's funny because his particular brand of arrogance never got to the point of being, what the hell, get off my screen kind of arrogance, you know? Instead, it was kind of an endearing arrogance. No, my love is superior to yours kind of a thing, whatever. Next up, we have Kosh, as in the real Kosh, not Ulkesh, just to make that clear. I actually know someone personally who would consider Kosh to be his favorite character in this show, so I can totally understand this one as well. Kosh is probably I shouldn't say probably. Kosh is the only Vorlon we actually can relate to at all. But more than anything, I think Kosh was really fleshed out by how he presented himself in his dreams to certain characters, most notably Jakar and, of course, Sheridan. That scene where Kosh was dying and was reaching out to him as his dad, that was a powerful moment. I could definitely see that one. And also tied with 2 votes is Zack. Now, Zack surprised me. When I first started doing these ruminations, I gotta be honest, I kind of forgot Zack existed. And it wasn't until I went back through that I was like, wow, he's been with the show like from the beginning. And Zack, in many ways, I feel like he was intended to be an O'Brien-type character, but just never quite actually managed it the same way O'Brien did. Cole Meany is a fantastic actor, so it's no surprise that he could pull off that everyman sort of a feel. But nevertheless, Zack is probably the closest thing to the everyman that the show has, and just kind of an ordinary guy trying to keep up amidst the nightmarish things that are going on around him. Next, we have, standing alone with 4 votes to her, Delenn, the woman who is arguably the second main character of the entire series, and probably the longest-running character overall, not counting the other 2, which I'll get to later, of course. Delenn, what can I say about Delenn? The zealot who isn't blind, and the naive woman who has wisdom. She's a strange contradiction, and I've always loved that sort of dichotomy in her perspective and the way that she brings things into a new light. Whether it is for good or for bad, I still enjoy it. Next up, and these 3 are all tied with 5 votes for them, we have Marcus. Now, I know 3 people personally who list Marcus as their favorite character, and I think it's pretty much because of the snarking. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but Marcus is really good at just kind of flippantly being snarky, but at the same time he's Batman. But I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as he's the kind of person who is prepared, who trains himself, who tries to be the best as he can, and is trying to make up for failures of the past, blah, 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 blah. It's just, unlike Batman, who's always the broody misery guts kind of a character, Marcus knows how to crack a damn joke. So I can see the appeal there. Next up, again, tied with 5, we have Sheridan. I'm a little surprised at Sheridan being this low on the list, since he is arguably the central character of the series. Well, when I say central, that's actually... See, we all know who the main character of Babylon 5 is, and you'll notice I haven't mentioned him yet. But Sheridan is probably the A-list primary actor of the thing. You know, if this was an old theater release, Bruce Boxleitner's name would be on the very top of the list because he's the showrunner, even though the show isn't really quite a route-bound. He's kind of the Titus of Babylon 5. But again, don't mean that as an insult. I don't have much else to say about him. I love his presentation. I think Bruce does a great job of acting as him. I think he's a wonderful combination of hardline military, goofy, silly, crazy. You know, he hits many elements. He's got a lot of dimensions to him, and I love that. Next up, with an astonishing 10 votes, twice as many as the previous 3, we have Veer. What more can I say about Veer that hasn't already been said? If you have not looked this up, there's a relatively recent, a couple-year-old interview that was done by... Oh, God, I can't think of his name, with Stephen Frank, the gentleman who plays Veer, who was telling about how he got the job of Veer. And that really says everything you need to say about Veer. He's like, oh, God, I've got the soap in my eyes, and I was trying to tint up my hair, and I didn't know what to do, and I'm sorry, and oh, my God, it's Veer. That is so awesome. He is such an endearing, lovable character, and he is unique in the sense that as he is traveling through the political machinations and the galaxy-altering events of Babylon 5, he never really loses that core of who he is. The outside changes, his perspectives changes, but the core of Veer never corrupts. I think that's one of the things that makes him so damned endearing. It's nice to see someone who's just a genuinely good person and stays that way. Coming in next, also with 10 votes, y'all probably saw this one coming, Ivanova. Now, Ivanova is another one of those common favorites. When I most commonly hear about favorites, I hear about Ivanova. In fact, truth be told, I figured Ivanova would take the number 3 slot because it was actually quite close between Veer, Ivanova, and the actual number 3 slot. Now, the thing is, Ivanova... As weird as this is going to sound, she's not actually my favorite character. In fact, as I was going through this time around, I found myself liking her less than I remembered. She has a lot of great lines, but she doesn't know how to perform them usually. When Ivanova's coming across as a badass, it usually feels lacking. What really sold Ivanova for me were her human moments. The scene where she, died, basically, but then was brought back by Marcus. Or the scene where she knows she is going to die and is talking to Delenn and Sheridan. Or the scene where she is struggling with the powerlessness of what just happened with President Santiago. Those human elements. The scene, I was just talking about this, the scene where she has to come to grips with what happened with her father. Those human moments are when I really like Ivanova, and when I think Claudia Christian really actually shines as an actress, my opinion. So, you can all probably already guess, but let's just pretend to be surprised here with coming in at number 3. Admittedly, I was a little surprised that this was him and not Ivanova, but Garibaldi is a really awesome character. Every now and again, he can be a little irritating, and as I said before, I feel that some of his arc at the end of Season 4 was a little bit badly done. But then they turn it around and just make it awesome. What more can I say about Garibaldi? He is brilliant, he is deductive, he knows how to look at complex facts rather than just surface facts. It's one of his key character traits. He is a goofball. He knows how to be silly, and he knows how to be supportive. He knows how to really throw himself into the moment. He speechifies, but he does a great... He's like the inverse of Jakar's speechifying, because Jakar gives these massive, eloquent, amazing, world-turning speeches. Garibaldi gives a speech that feels like a guy just pouring his heart out on the moment. Oh, here. And it's not that eloquent, and it's not that powerful, but it's very real. And then every now and again, Garibaldi gets off on these Garibaldiisms, or I don't even know what else to call that, actually, where he's just, hey, yeah, so, yeah, and I got to do this thing, and then I got to do this thing, but if I knew what I was doing, then I wouldn't know what I was doing, and I don't want to be in my own business, And, of course, he loves Daffy Duck. How could I possibly ignore that? Love me some Garibaldi. Not much else to add to that. It is a damned shame that we have lost this actor. Coming in at number 2, and 1... Yeah, I know none of you are going to be surprised by this one. I admit I was a little bit surprised by this one. Jakar and Londo both tied for first, with an overwhelming majority, over double the votes of Garibaldi, almost triple the votes of everyone below him. Huge, and it's so obvious why. These two actors have amazing chemistry together, and in general, most of the entire story of Babylon 5 could be said quite literally to be the arcs of these two respective characters. They have the most depth to them at the start. They have the most character development to them throughout the series. Very few characters continue developing throughout the course of all 5 seasons, but these two fit that mark. We see Jakar go from a stereotypical bad guy to a warrior, to a repentant monk, to a spiritual leader, to a just the whole gamut. And we see Londo go from someone who is a has-been, who is at the worst position he's ever been at, to rising up to prominence, to trying to scrap at what tiny little bits of power he can, to being at the height of grandeur and glory and hating every moment of it, and then slowly becoming disgusted with his own I want to say corporation, his own republic, his own people, and wishing to try and drag them back to something resembling reality, something that is at least decent, and willing to lay down his own life to accomplish it. I cannot praise these two characters or their actors enough. And again, it is a goddamn shame that we have lost Andreas Katsoulas and his fantastic performance of this. Huge shout-outs to these two characters and how amazing they are. Honestly, I don't think I would enjoy Babylon 5 even half as much if not for these two excellent characters. So now let's talk about arcs. See, here's the thing. With something like Voyager, or when we get to a TNG or Deep Space Nine, I can say, well, what's your favorite episode? And you could say, well, it's Inner Light, or it's, In the Pale Moonlight, bam, you could just say that, right? Babylon 5, it's a little harder to nail down one specific episode as truly great amongst the others. It's easier to nail down a specific arc, to say, okay, this arc right here, that is the arc that I find to be the best. Now, what I find astonishing is that there was, again, a huge spread of votes. In fact, the number one arc that was voted, which is also my personal favorite arc, only got a mere 6 votes. Not because a lot, not because, as Kafka's going by here, not because it's a terrible arc, but because there's so many other arcs that got voted for instead. Now, let's just go ahead and go down these. I've kind of used my own names here to name these arcs, so forgive me for being flowery, but the first arc we have on the list, and all of these have 1 vote to them each, is the search for the old ones, the trying to reach out to the lost ones with Ivanova and with Marcus, and their search and desire to try and gain some kind of aid and furthering of their cause against what they at the time believed was their principal enemies, the Shadows. As well, tied, we have The Shadow Looms, is what I call this arc. This is the arc that was just after the Narn Centauri War, but before the Shadow War actually became hot, when the Shadows were really maneuvering in the background and their influence was being felt more and more throughout the Centauri Republic and the other races in general. And it was this slowly growing dread as we know this is coming, and there's so little we can do about it. Also tied here, Bester and the Telepaths. Now, this one was a very generic arc, but I gave it to him because this is an arc that crosses like 3 seasons, because it only gets like 1 or 2 episodes per season to it. Bester's overall arc and his character development throughout the series is rather extensive, actually. It's just, you get like a snippet, and then nothing for a while, and then another snippet, so that's why it all really qualifies as just a single arc. But we learn so much more about Bester and what he cares about, and his vision of the future for the telepaths as a people. Coming in next, this is an easy one to identify. I call this one, There Is a Hole in Your Mind. This is the arc that pretty much only went throughout Season 1, but was all about the build-up to the great mystery of Sinclair, a mystery that was developed very, very early on, and that obviously JMS knew about going even into the series to begin with. The reality of what happened during the missing 24 hours, and the nature of the end of the Earth-Minbari War, and the eventual reveal of that and the significance of it to the development of the series. Speaking of which, no, I'm sorry, no, that's later. The next arc is what I call Garibaldi the Puppet. This arc is Garibaldi's slow descent into losing everything around him and all of the pieces of him. As I talked about during the Rumination, it could be debated how much of this is the programming, how much of this is the external influence, and how much of this is Garibaldi himself. But anyone can tell that this is not the Garibaldi, that there's something wrong with him as he was slowly getting worse and worse and worse, until that horrible moment in which he's sitting in a tram and Bester walks in and lets him go. Which eventually Garibaldi returns the favor on that, actually. Next arc would be what I call Lita's Crusade, which is probably one of the major story arcs of Season 5, really. Because it goes across almost the entirety of Season 5, from the beginnings of her disillusionment with the Inner Circle, her getting closer to Byron, and her eventually taking up his flag and leading it on a crusade to try and lead for better rights or better power, whatever it is she was actually after when it comes to the telepaths. Now, I say that way, not in a dismissive manner, but to emphasize that we don't really know the full extent of Lita's actual desires. Obviously, she wants revenge against the Psi Corps, but what does she want? A planet? No, a planet isn't a goal. A planet is a tool that leads to a goal. We know what Byron wanted, but I always wondered what Lita wanted in the end. And given what happened with Byron, I'm pretty sure she never thought that out either. Next up, we have Sheridan's Rebirth. Really, I don't have much else to add to this. This was a relatively short arc, but it was a good one as well. It's all of the stuff regarding Sheridan and his coordination and interaction with Lorien up to and including the end of the Vorlon and Shadow War. And the revelation, and Sheridan himself, Bruce Boxleitner, has talked about this, how he had to start acting his character differently because this was a Sheridan now who knew that he had to do stuff. A Sheridan that was touched by destiny, if you will, and yet at the same time hates that fact. It's true. It's a fact, but he doesn't like it. And so there's some really good character moments in there as well. The next arc, again, with one vote for it, was Neroon. I just call this Neroon because I think nothing else is really needed there. While it was cut off a little bit short, it was nice to see Neroon slowly develop from stereotypical asshole to obstructionist militarist to willing to think things through on both sides to actively trying to make the situation better. His slow development, although it was again a little truncated, from being effectively a bad guy to a good guy, was very well done. And of course the actor nails it, and so very, very much props there. Next up, last one with a single vote, is the Centauri Alliance conflict, which is exclusively in Season 5 and showcases the Centauri under the control of the Keepers, slowly maneuvering the rest of the people in order to break the Centauri down and weaken them and brutalize them so that the Keepers and the Drach can then take over and lead to their own long-term goals that they're wanting for. I don't have much else to add to that. It is almost a classic Greek tragedy, what happens with the Centauri and the Alliance conflict in Season 5. It is a damned shame because it's so obvious in hindsight, and I really think that if anybody was actually thinking about it, they would have realized, well, hang on a second, this isn't right. And of course, at the end of it, we see Londo eventually having to be ostracized and pushed away from his friends, and we know how much he values that, as well as his allies. Londo sitting alone in a throne room, ruling over a pile of ashes. Next, we have a single arc that had 2 votes for it. I call this one from the bottom to the top. Veer's story. The story of a bumbling, inept idiot who was... Well, I shouldn't say that, because Veer's actually not stupid, is he? A bumbling, inept, naive person, let's put it more accurately there, who was assigned someone effectively as a punishment, and then slowly grew closer and closer to Londo over the years and expressed his wisdom and his keen wit as he went throughout the series. And there were so many times in which Veer would look at a situation and just know exactly what's going on and be able to identify it just like that. Fantastic stuff there. And of course, that led to Veer eventually becoming the new ambassador and then eventually becoming emperor in place of Mr. Malari. And, from all accounts, leading to a new unparalleled era of prosperity for the Centauri. So that's nice, too. Next, we have 2, which are both tied with 3 votes. First, and I'm a little surprised by these, because I figured these 2 would be at the top. The first arc I just call Londo Malari of the Centauri. I almost feel like I don't have anything to add to that. It is the arc of Londo from the beginning, from when he was at his worst, all the way until his death, when he finally passes on as emperor. As has been said before by many people, including JMS himself, Londo is effectively the main character. This is the story of Londo Malari, and his arc as he goes through all 5 seasons is one of brilliance and tragedy and triumph and hope and despair and love and terror and all the gamut in between, and it is a fantastic arc and brilliantly acted again. And I'm going to stop before I could just start gushing about him again. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is the Earth Civil War. This is the insurrection from Sheridan's group and those who were fighting against the Clark regime. There was some really excellent stuff there and some really powerful moments. It probably went by just a little bit too quickly, but at the same time, the entire Civil War was something that had been built up to since Season 1. So this was something that has been well established and we are well invested in. So by the time the Civil War went hot, I don't know about you guys, but I was just on the edge of my seat like, oh God, now what? Oh God, now what? Coming in next, these both have 4 votes each. We have the Babylon 4 arc. Now, this one astonished me. I mean no offense to anybody. I'm not really a huge fan of the Babylon 4 arc. It's well written. It's a nice little thing. There's a couple of continuity issues we could point out, but for the most part, they did a good job of contiguously connecting Babylon 4 to Babylon 4 across the seasons. And that arc and the mystery of what happened with Babylon 4 and the significance of it leading to Sinclair's eventual revelation, or I guess the culmination of his character arc in leading the people as Valen to the end of the Shadow War, 1,000 years ago, is awesome. It's just not one I would usually list at the top of the list. So This one got quite a few votes. Like I said, it's pretty high up on the list, and it is only surpassed by 4 more, one of which includes the arc I called Giants in the Playground. This one really speaks for itself. It's actually a relatively short arc, only several episodes long, but this arc is very powerful and just smashes you in the face over and over until it finally concludes. This is the arc in which the Vorlons are like, well, we're done, and just start attacking. And the Shadows are like, well, we're done, and just start attacking. This is a war in heaven, and the two forces just kind of collide with each other, and everyone in the middle are just screwed. And if not for a large number of things moving in a very specific direction, it's pretty likely that this would have gone really badly for the entire galaxy. Now, of course, I really wish I could show you footage of these episodes. I really do. But unfortunately, as I mentioned at the beginning, I was having trouble getting footage, so we're just going to leave the looping background on there. But coming in at number 3... I would like to say I'm surprised by this one, but I'm not. Because this ultimately, even though it isn't, feels like the first true story arc of Babylon 5. Throughout all of Season 1, there's been this build-up, a lot of build-up. The issues going on back Earth was building up. The Narn Centauri aggression was building up. All of this stuff was slowly boiling throughout all of Season 1 until finally it got to the point where Narn and Centauri finally declared war. The Narn-Centauri War is coming in at number 3 for favorite arc amongst fans and myself when it comes to Babylon 5. This is a powerful arc, even more so by the fact that by everything that was leading up to it, you would assume it would go heavily one-sided one way or the other, but thanks to the influx of the Shadows and some certain stuff in the behind the scenes that I myself mentioned as we're going through the Ruminations, yeah, this goes really, really badly, and it goes from going badly to just being downright horrific, and leads to some of my favorite moments in the entire series, including that phenomenal speech by Jakar as he is escorted away from the assembly chambers after having been stripped of rank for the defeated Narn. Coming in at number 2... Part of the reason this one surprises me is because Londo's arc was voted much lower. But Jakar's arc, which I call Jakar and the Path of Righteousness, is pretty much just as brilliant as Londo's. You know, I've been told over the years, who's your favorite character? Well, I always say Londo, but there's always like that asterisk of, and Jakar. It's hard to like Londo and not also like Jakar in this series. I call this the Path of Righteousness, though, because if you think about it, Jakar is always fighting for what he, at the time, believes to be righteous. Righteous vengeance and fury against the Centauri. Righteous lifting up his people against their oppressors. Righteously trying to reach out and connect with his former enemies and lead to a better future. And righteously trying to assemble some kind of new alliance to create a new beginning for a better tomorrow of peace and prosperity. He never leaves the path of righteousness. He just redefines it as he goes throughout the series, and I find that fascinating in its own right. And of course, Andreas Katsoulas is amazing. What else do I really need to say about that? Which leaves us at the number 1 arc, which is the one I really wanted to get footage of. Number 1 arc of Babylon 5 is, drumroll please, I don't actually have a drumroll sound effect, so let's just cut to the thing. The number 1 arc. I'm not gonna like drag it out or anything. This is Cartagia and the Court of Consequences. This is pretty much Season 4, Episode 1, up to I think Episode 5 or something like that. All of the episodes from when Cartagius first has an on-screen presence until the moment when he is killed by Vir. That whole arc is actually and is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. I mean, yes, there's stuff going on, back with everyone else, with the Narn and the Shadows and the Vorlons, all this other stuff going on. This arc right here is so powerful. It contains our two best characters, Jakar and Londo, and Veer's involved as well. It contains two of our best villains, Rifa and Cartagia. It contains so many different levels of horror and tragedy and darkness and hope, and they succeed. It actually has a good ending. Cartagia is dead, the Centauri pull out of Narn, Narn win their freedom, and they try to end the cycle of violence. You know, Jakar's response, "What have I suffered?" What can he do but laugh? It is such a powerful arc. Which leads me to something I wanted to talk about. I was surprised. I was looking at all the arcs, and if you asked me a few years ago, what's your favorite arc in Babylon 5, I'd be like, I don't know, probably the Narn Centauri War or the Earth Civil War. Those both just come to mind immediately. But when I really thought about it and really sat down, all of my favorite moments in this series are all kind of condensed into the Cartagia arc, into all of the events there. I forget his name, forgive me, but the minister who ends up becoming influenced with a keeper, he starts off there, and we see the sheer decadence and the problems of the court. We see what Londo has to go through. We see what Jakar has to go through. That whipping scene is so powerful, as Londo's just like whispering, "Please, please, just no." He's forcing himself to look at it. Veer is literally cringing into Londo's jacket as Jakar is nearly being beaten to death by this. There are so many powerful moments. There's so much powerful character in that arc. I can't even say, I can't even name a single specific moment that is truly amazing in that arc. If I had to, I would have to point to when Londo and Jakar are conspiring in the cell. And Jakar basically, I forget the exact wording, but Jakar says, "You don't know what you're asking of me." And Londo says, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do." As two men are prepared to throw away everything they care about in order to try and save everything they care about. Very powerful stuff. Love this show. Love this show. Thank you, everyone, for voting. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I very much appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed this little finale. Next week, we will be starting the beginnings of the TNG and DS9 thing. I need a little more time to set it up. So we're going to be doing kind of an intro thing rather than baking that into the episodes of Encounter at Farpoint and Emissary. So I hope you have enjoyed, and I hope to see you guys there.